She called him weak. That was before his blade made the whole tunnel sing. The alarm was already screaming when I pulled on my belt that IT was not a drill. I learned the difference in my first week aboard the Dominion's Reach. A drill had a pattern to it. A small pause. A controlled rhythm. This sound had none of that. It was harsh, steady, and sharp enough to make your heart speed up before your mind understood WHY. IT filled the corridor outside my room. It bounced off the curved metal walls and sat heavy in my chest that I grabbed my field kit with one hand and my blade with the other. The blade was always the first thing people noticed about me. IT had been that way from the first morning I stepped onto this ship. The IT was plain carbon steel, hand-forged, old in design, simple in shape, and completely out of place on a Veil warship packed with plasma rifles, powered armor, and systems built by a civilization far ahead of ours. My grandfather made it in a small shed behind his house in Yorkshire, back on Earth, with tools older than most of the machines on this ship. The morning I left, he put it in my hands and said only one thing. "It never needs charging, lad." I laughed when he said it. He did not, but he looked at me with that quiet seriousness old men get when they have lived long enough to know what matters and what only looks important for a little while at the time. I thought he was being dramatic. Later, I understood he was being exact, that I was the only human on the ship. Sergeant Cale Marrow. 31 years old. Former Earth Ground Infantry. 2 campaigns. For commendations. 1 knee injury that mostly healed but still warned me about cold weather before any sensor could. Officially, I was attached to the 6th Strike Unit of the Veil Dominion as a diplomatic representative. That was the polite version. The true version was simpler, that I was a treaty requirement. The Earth Coalition had signed an exchange agreement with the Veil Dominion the year before, and one part of that agreement demanded a human presence aboard a Veil military vessel. The person they chose was me. Why me? Because my record was good enough. My body held up under pressure. And I spoke standard galactic clearly enough to be understood without repetition, which turned out to be rarer among human infantry than the negotiators had hoped. The Veil were extraordinary. There is no cleaner word for them. They stood close to 2 meters tall. Their bodies were built for speed and precision in a way that felt wrong until you watched them move. Then it felt inevitable. Their reflexes were faster than ours. Their bones were denser. Their wounds closed quicker. Their eyesight worked in darkness that would leave a human blind. Their plasma weapons could slice through reinforced plating. Their armor turned one soldier into something close to a walking wall, and they had been at war in one form or another for 600 years, long enough to become very good at it. Long enough to look at a human soldier with an old steel blade and decide he was either a curiosity or a mistake. Commander Sarah Van made her opinion of me clear in the first hour. She led the unit. Tall even by Veil standards. Hard face. Calm eyes. The kind of officer who had spent so long in command that comfort no longer interested her. She had 12 ribbons across her chest plate, each one earned in a different war zone across the outer reach. She had never lost a unit in combat. She planned to keep it that way. On my first morning aboard, she was giving a briefing in the forward corridor when I arrived. The squad stood in 2 lines, armor polished, rifles secured along the wall behind them. She stopped speaking when I entered. Her eyes moved to me, then to the blade at my hip. She looked at it for one long second, then looked back at her soldiers and said, "Does the soft creature intend to cut his food with that?" They laughed. All 8 of them. Quick, easy laughter. The kind shared by people who know with total confidence that they're not the target of the joke. Private Yeth laughed the loudest. He was the youngest in the unit and still had that young soldier habit of measuring his reactions by his commander's face. That I looked down at the blade. Then I looked back at Commander Sarah Van. "It does what it needs to do," I said. She turned back to her briefing without another word. That was our first conversation. The days after that were not cruel. That matters. The Veil were not petty people. They were not nasty for pleasure. They simply treated me the way soldiers treat anything they've already decided is not important to the job. That I was not important to the job, that I had not earned my place in their unit through shared battle, skill inside their systems, or long service beside them. I had been placed there by policy, by diplomacy, by signatures on paper made far away from any place where people actually bled. They all knew it, including me. They briefed together, trained together, ate together. I attended because protocol required it. I trained in the same gym because there was nowhere else to go. I worked out before dawn, so I would not take up space when a veil came in. I ate at the edge of the common area and watched the way they moved around each other. You learn a lot about soldiers when they are relaxed, much more than you learn from watching them under orders. Yeth started sitting across from me during the evening meal on the third night. He never asked permission, that he never explained himself, that he simply arrived with his tray, sat down, ate in silence, then got up and left. The next night, he did the same. Then the next tea became a pattern, a small one. Quiet, not discussed by anyone. Yeth was a collector of details. I began to see that quickly. He stored observations the way other soldiers stored ammunition. Quietly, carefully. For later, every evening, I cleaned the blade, always the same way, edge first, then the flat on both sides, then the handle, then a second check of the edge. The blade did not need that much care. I had not used it since boarding the ship, but the act itself mattered. Cleaning was not only maintenance. It was attention. It was a way of saying, this thing matters enough to care for properly. The veil noticed. They never asked about it, but I caught their eyes on me more than once. Quick glances, slightly too long to be accidental. Soldiers are very good at watching without seeming to watch. They're also very good at noticing when someone else is doing the same. It made for an interesting silence between us. The mission briefing came on the 7th day. Kef 9 was a dead moon at the edge of a disputed sector. No atmosphere worth mentioning. No life. Cold rock. Deep cracks in the surface. Long tunnels under the crust. 22 days earlier, a Dominion archive drone had crashed there carrying navigational records, intelligence files linked to active operations, and what the briefing officer called sensitive protocol data. The core had to be recovered before anyone else reached it. That would have been simple under normal conditions. Kef 9 did not offer normal conditions. The problem was the hollow. The officer explained them in the calm voice of someone used to seeing disbelief on other people's faces. The hollow were not alive. They were war machines left behind by a civilization long gone. No one used their original name anymore except historians. Their cities were dust. Their builders were gone. But the constructs remained. They were roughly human in shape if you did not look too closely. Dark metal frames. No organic parts. No speech. No command hierarchy anyone had ever managed to break or bargain with. They had one purpose: destroy intruders. Kef 9 had been their territory longer than the Dominion had even existed. They maintained themselves, rebuilt themselves, mined raw material from the moon. And most important of all, they produced a constant electromagnetic field that shut down any energy-based system inside its range. Every plasma rifle, every powered armor system, every suit display, every communicator, every scanner, every shielded version the Dominion had tested. 3 previous retrieval attempts had failed. Nothing powered stayed alive once it crossed into the hollow zone. The room went quiet after that. Commander Saravan asked about hardened systems, alternate shielding, redundant backups. The answer was the same every time. No, nothing worked. I sat at the far end of the table and looked at the mission display. Then I looked down at my hands, and I thought about my grandfather's shed, cold mornings in Yorkshire, the smell of heated metal, the sound of the grinding wheel. Commander Saravan dismissed the room and turned to her senior soldiers. She did not ask for my opinion. I did not offer it. I went back to my quarters, checked the blade's edge, and sat on the side of my bunk for a long time. A team built on powered systems was going into a dead zone where powered systems became useless. That changes everything. I thought about it long enough to stop feeling clever and start feeling careful. We departed early the next morning. The drop pod carried 8 Veil soldiers in full exo armor and 1 human in standard field gear with a steel blade at his side. Commander Saravan gave me one order before the hatch sealed. Stay behind the unit. Do not engage. Do not slow us down. I nodded once. The hatch locked. The pod dropped. We hit Kef 9 hard enough to shake the teeth in my skull. The ramp opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of stone, dust, and complete silence. Then the hollow field reached us. The armor failed first. All 8 suits locked at the same time with a series of hard metal clicks. The plasma rifles died a breath later. The helmet displays flickered and went black. The communicators burst with one sharp hit of static and then nothing at all. Silence again. Heavy. Final. Absolute. Commander Sarah Van stood still in her dead armor. In the thin light from a crack high above us. I watched her take 2 full seconds to understand what had happened. 2 seconds is a long time for someone like her. She moved through every part of life with quick certainty. Those 2 seconds told me exactly how serious this was. I drew the blade before she turned. There was only a little light in the tunnel mouth. Not much, but enough that I could work with enough. I can see the path, I said. She turned to look at me. I could not fully read her face in the dim light, but I heard the pause before she answered. That pause held more than surprise. It held reevaluation. Then she said one word. Move. I moved first. The tunnel was narrow and cold and cut with faint mineral light along the walls. Behind me, I could hear the Veils struggling with the dead weight of their armor. Without power, their suits were no longer an advantage. They were resistance. Every step cost more effort than it should have. But they followed. Of course they followed. They were professionals. I listened as we moved. Sound, air, echo, the shape of closed space. The small things people stop hearing when machines start hearing for them. A wide tunnel sounds different than a tight one. A bend carries air differently than a straight path. Open chambers breathe in a way narrow corridors do not. You can feel it on your hands if you are paying attention. Most people are not. Humans learned that skill long before we had sensors. We carried it with us whether the galaxy respected it or not. We were 11 minutes into the tunnel system when I felt it change. A shift in the air, a small pressure change from a side passage. I stopped half a step too late. Something moved in the dark ahead, tall, angular, made of black metal and patient violence. The first hollow stepped into the pale, mineral light. Behind me, Commander Saravan raised a dead plasma rifle out of instinct. I already had the blade in my hand. The first hollow stepped into the pale, mineral light. IT did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. IT moved with the calm certainty of a machine that had been doing the same work for centuries and had never once needed to doubt its own method. Tall frame, dark metal, long limbs built for reach rather than speed in the first movement. It came out the side passage and turned toward us with smooth, measured precision. Commander Saravan brought up a rifle. The indicator was dead. Nothing happened, and I was already moving. The blade left the sheath with that clean sound my grandfather loved so much. Steel against leather, then open air. A short, clear note. In that tunnel, in that silence, it rang out sharper than I had ever heard it before. Why grandfather used to say, a blade tells you when it is ready. I used to think that was the kind of thing old craftsmen said because it sounded wise. Standing there, I revised that opinion. The hollow locked onto me. Its sensors swept over my position. Then it came 0.3 seconds, maybe 4. That was all it took. Close work. Tight angle. Thin mineral light. My body moving before thought had time to slow it down. I knew where joints fail. I knew where frames carry stress. I knew where metal looks strong, but is actually weakest under movement. A plasma shot would have ended it faster from a distance. The blade required something else. Distance gave way to precision. Power gave way to exactness. That I stepped inside its reach, cut at the first joint housing, turned with its movement, and opened the second weakness before it could correct. The hollow stopped moving. Not slowly. All at once. One moment, it was a threat. The next, it was a shape of dead metal on the tunnel floor. I stepped back, turned. The unit was staring at me, 0.8 Veil soldiers in dead armor, all completely still. Yetha's mouth was slightly open. Commander Saravan looked at the machine on the floor, then at the blade in my hand, then at me. Her face had not settled on one reaction yet. It was working through several at once. I waited. Move, she said. That was enough. I turned and continued down the tunnel. Behind me, I heard 8 sets of heavy armored boots start moving again. The tunnels of Keth. 9 were not natural. That became obvious the deeper we went. The walls were too smooth in places. The curves too deliberate. Some sections widened with a kind of design that rock does not make by accident. Whoever built the hollow had shaped these passages long ago for reasons nobody fully understood anymore. The veil followed in a line behind me. Commander Saravan walked directly in my back, that I could hear her armor working against her with every step. Powered exosuits were built to add strength and range to the body's movement. Without power, they became weight. Dense, resistant, something closer to a burden than an advantage. She never complained once. That told me something useful. Yeth was 3 places behind her. When the tunnel widened enough, I caught him shifting slightly to the side so he could watch my hands. Not openly, not rudely. He was studying the way I carried the blade unsheathed, the way I adjusted grip and angle as the shape of the tunnel changed around us. He was not copying, that he was collecting. The second hollow came from above, that I heard it before I saw it, that a slight change in the pressure of the tunnel. Air moving downward through a narrow shaft in the ceiling. A tiny compression in the space ahead of me. So small most people would have missed it completely. But once you know what to notice, small things become very loud. I stepped right. The hollow dropped where I had been a moment before. The blade was already in place before the machine fully oriented. This one was harder, larger frame, longer reach, faster opening movement than the first. Its second pass cut my shoulder. Not deep enough to stop the arm, but deep enough to open the skin through my jacket. Cold air touched the wound. Immediately, I felt it, placed it to the side. That is one of the first serious lessons a soldier learns. When you're hurt in the middle of a task, you do not pretend the injury is not real. Pretending is useless. It only makes fools die surprised. You acknowledge the damage, put it where it belongs in your mind, and continue until the work is done. I continued. 2 movements later, the hollow stopped as well. I stepped back again. This time Commander Saravan came to my side immediately. "How did you know it was there?" she asked. "Air pressure changed," I said. Something moved down the shaft and pushed the air ahead of it. She was quiet for a moment. "Our systems do not detect changes at that sensitivity." "I know," I said. "Your systems detect many things I cannot. That just is not one of them." She looked at me for another second, then nodded once. "Continue." So I did. The deeper we moved, the clearer the pattern became. The hollow did not wander. They patrolled. Their routes overlapped. Their timing repeated. Pairs in some sections. Single sweeps in others. The same turns. The same returns. Once you watch enough of anything, even something dangerous, it starts to reveal its habits. And anything with habits can be predicted. A T1 junction, I lifted a hand and stopped the unit. That we waited in silence. That I counted. Then I said 2 units. Left passage. They sweep to the far end and back. Gap between return cycle and next pass is about 40 seconds. Commander Saravan moved up beside me and stared into the darkness ahead. She could not see the exact details I was reading, but she listened to them the same way she would have listened to tactical data on a live battlefield display. "Enough time to cross cleanly?" she asked. "At a steady pace, yes," I said. "Not fast. Fast makes noise. Go first and confirm." I crossed, back flat to the far wall. Blade ready, eyes on the dark line of the passage. The hollow returned exactly when I expected. It passed 2 meters from me, never turned, and continued on its route. That I counted the gap. Then I signaled. The unit crossed in 2 groups, smooth and controlled. Commander Saravan came last. Even in dead armor, even in bad conditions, she moved with the kind of measured precision only long experience builds. No motion, no panique, no hurry pretending to be courage. When she reached my side, she looked ahead and then at me. "You navigate like this with your senses alone," she said. "Yes." "Trained." "Partly," I said. "Partly not. Some of it is older than training. Humans did this kind of thing long before we had instruments to help." She held that answer in silence for a moment. Then she said, "Continue." We went deeper. The hollow became more frequent. Pairs turned into clusters. Clusters into layered patrol zones. We were getting close to the center of their territory, and every defensive system protects its center harder than its edges. That is true whether it is made of flesh, metal, or policy. Not every hollow needed to be fought. That mattered that a fight solves one problem and creates another. Noise, delay, fatigue, blood loss if things go badly. I started using the patterns more aggressively. At several points, I held the unit still against the wall and let patrols pass within meters of us. The key was absolute stillness, not nervous stillness, not the kind that trembles, the stillness of a thing that has decided not to move at all. The Veil were good at that. Very good. Trained soldiers can make themselves disappear inside a shadow if the situation asks for it. But Yeth caught my attention more than once. He settled into stillness in a way that went beyond discipline. His body learned quickly. He watched once, understood twice, and adjusted by the third attempt that I filed that away. The retrieval chamber came 90 minutes after we entered the tunnel network. It was a large cavern worked into the original structure. The ceiling rose high overhead in a rough dome. The mineral light here was stronger than in the tunnels, bright enough that even the Veil could see clearly without depending entirely on me. And there, in the center of the chamber, leaning against a rock formation scarred by impact, was the archive core. Gray-green cylinder, Dominion seal, stamped into the casing, damaged on the outside, still intact. That I looked at it for 2 seconds. Then I looked at the 40 hollow units standing around the edge of the chamber, motionless, not asleep, not inactive, just waiting. That is one of the unnerving things about machines. They do not get tired of waiting. They do not get bored, hungry, distracted, or cold. They simply remain where purpose told them to remain, and they can do that for longer than any living creature likes to think about. Point 40 constructs, point 1 way in. The same way out. In working weapons, in powered systems. That I started sorting through options in my head. Carefully, because careful thought before action usually saves more lives than speed does. Commander Saravan came to stand beside me. She took in the chamber, the core, the 40 machines. Then she spoke one word: options. There was something under that word I had not heard from her before. Not fear, not uncertainty, something narrower and more disciplined than that. Recognition. The recognition of a very capable officer facing a problem her usual tools could not solve. That I laid out the plan. Then I laid it out again, slower the second time, so every person had the exact piece they needed. The Veil processed tactical detail quickly. No one interrupted. No one asked for simplification. The plan itself was simple. Simple plans survive pressure better. I would enter the chamber first and pull the hollow toward the left side, making myself the obvious threat and drawing their movement away from the right. Under that distraction, a first team of 3 Veil soldiers would move along the right wall, reach the archive core, secure it, and prepare it for transport. The remaining 5 would hold the exit passage and prepare for the withdrawal. When the core was secure, I would disengage, bring the hollow after me, and pull them toward the tunnel mouth. The passage there narrowed enough that only one machine could come through at a time. In open space, 40 units was death. In a narrow throat. Numbers became less useful. Commander Saravan listened to all of it without expression. When I finished, she ran the whole thing through that hard, experienced mind of hers and found the point that mattered most. If the timing breaks before you reach the exit, she said, you will be trapped in the chamber with all of them. I know. Her eyes stayed on mine. Do you? Yes, I said. I have thought it through. It is still the best option we have. Silence again. Then she put one gauntlet hand on my arm. Only for a moment, and no speech. No dramatic words. No commander's blessing before a dangerous move. Just that brief solid weight of dead armor on my sleeve and a single NOD that was enough. That I turned toward the chamber entrance, drew the blade. The sound it made this time was different in the open space. Fuller, larger. The note left the steel, crossed the chamber, touched the dome overhead, and came back changed. Wider, deeper, almost layered. The nearest hollow turned first. Then the next after that. A wave of mechanical attention moved around the chamber and settled on me. I stepped forward and walked in. I stepped forward and walked into the chamber. The first 4 hollow moved from the left side exactly as I expected. That was the thing about them. Once you understood the rule they followed it completely. No fear, no hesitation, no instinct to second-guess a bad angle or a dangerous approach. They detected a threat and moved to destroy it. That was all that I gave them what they wanted. I drew them left. The first came high with a long cutting reach. I slipped inside it, turned my shoulder, and opened the joint under the arm. The second was already there before the first hit the stone. I cut low, pivoted, changed angle, and used its own forward force against it. Metal met stone. Sparks flashed in the mineral light. Then it too stopped moving. The third and fourth came together. That is always hard to point to. Opponents are not twice the problem. They are more than twice the problem because your space changes. Your timing changes. Every movement has to solve two dangers instead of one. I gave ground, let them widen, then broke the line between them before they could close it again. Point one fell. Then the other, and wasted reach, and extra motion. There's a point in close work where thinking in words becomes too slow to be useful. The body takes over if it has been trained enough, and all the mind does is keep direction. Left side, keep the draw. Leave the right side open. That was the whole job. Across the chamber, I heard the careful movement of the first Veil team slipping along the wall toward the archive core. Good. More hollow were turning now. The ones near the center shifted first. Then those along the far right. A slow wave of mechanical attention pulled toward me from every side of the chamber. I widened my path, giving them room to commit to me, making sure their angles carried them away from the route the Veil needed. The shoulder wound tightened. I put it away. Pain is useful only if it tells you something you need to know immediately. Once it has delivered the message, it can wait its turn. The fifth hollow came faster than the others. The sixth tried to flank wide. I adjusted. The blade moved in short, exact lines. It did not flash dramatically. It did not sing then, not yet. At that point, it was still only doing what it had been made to do. Enter where there was weakness. Leave damage where damage mattered. The chamber grew louder. Not loud in the way of guns or engines. Loud in the way hard work becomes loud. Metal striking metal. Boots on stone. The scrape of moving frames. My own breathing, control but heavier now. And through all of it, the note of the blade, each time it cleared space and returned. The first team reached the core. I knew it not because I could see them clearly from where I was, but because the movement of the hollow shifted for half a second. Machines react to changes in a space. The Veil were careful, but not invisible. The right side of the chamber stirred, then settled again as the machines continued to choose me as the greater threat. Good. Keep them on me. A draw only works as long as you remain the most important thing in the room. I made sure I did. I drove deeper toward the left arc of the chamber, forcing the hollow to follow, turning the fight into a moving line instead of a full surround. A straight retreat would have been cleaner to imagine, but clean ideas often die in real spaces. Curves create time. Arcs create options. I gave myself both. That was when I heard the blade change. I could see happen somewhere around the 6th or 7th close exchange. A small thing if you did not know what you were hearing. The note deepened. Not louder. Richer. Fuller. The steel had warmed now from motion, stress, contact, and the steady transfer of heat through my own hand. And why grandfather explained that to me. Once he said steel speaks differently when it has been working. The time, I thought he meant it like a poet. Later, I learned he meant it like a craftsman. The blade's voice had changed. Every time it moved now, the sound carried farther through the dome above me and came back layered. A more complex note. Something warmer. Something alive in the acoustic sense, even if not in any other one. That the blade was beginning to sing. That I do not have a better word for it. Not because I'm trying to make the moment beautiful, but because accuracy matters more than modesty. That is what it sounded like. Not a scream. Not a ring. A sustained living note drawn out of steel under work. The hollow kept coming. My body had narrowed down to the immediate truths of the chamber. Distance, angle, timing, where the next threat was. Which direction the group, behind me, needed to remain open. How much space I had left before I had to begin the withdrawal. Then I heard the signal point, 3 sharp strikes against the tunnel wall from the exit passage, controlled. Deliberate. Repeated. The archive core was secure. The first team was clear. Now came the difficult part. Drawing attention is one skill. Disengaging without losing control of that attention is another. I began the withdrawal slowly. That mattered. If I moved too fast, the line would collapse. The hollow would spread. Some would break off. Others would take shorter angles. The chamber would stop being a single problem and become many small ones, which is how people get trapped at I moved backward in a wide curve toward the exit passage, never straight. Straight lines are promises. And in a fight, promises are dangerous. The hollow followed. Not all at once, but enough. Their purpose was too simple to outgrow. I had become the active threat. I remained the active threat. So they stayed on me, exactly as planned. Across the chamber, I heard the second Veil team settling into position at the tunnel mouth. Heavy armor against stone. Quiet but not silent. The sound of soldiers preparing to do hard work with no certainty of comfort. I kept moving. The shoulder was worse now. My arms still functioned, but there was a hot stiffness beginning to spread under the cold. That is how injuries often feel in bad environments. The body cannot decide whether the damage is heat or ice, so it gives you both. I kept moving. The first hollow reached the tunnel mouth just behind me, and there the geometry of the fight changed. That had been the whole point. The passage narrowed enough that only one construct could enter at a time. The first one came through and met not plasma fire, but mass. Two Veil soldiers in dead exo-armor hit it together from either side, using weight, leverage, and pure drill discipline. The machine stopped. Not elegantly, not quickly, but completely. The second came through. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each met the same answered NO energy systems to NO powered assistance. Just trained bodies inside dense armor, moving with precision and complete commitment in a space that favored them at last. That was the thing Commander Saravan understood immediately once the plan was spoken aloud. Dead armor in an open chamber was a weakness. Dead armor in a narrow choke point became something else entirely. Dense, stable, hard to move, harder to get past. The work was brutal, not because any one exchange was impossible, but because sustained effort changes people. It strips away everything unneeded. Breath got louder. Movement got heavier. The Veil were audibly working now, which told me more than any spoken complaint would have. Veil soldiers do not tire easily. If I could hear fatigue in them, then the passage was demanding something very real that I joined where I could. There are moments when a plan ends and the simpler law takes over. Do what is needed, where it is needed, until the thing is finished. So I did. The passage became rhythm, impact, brace turn, cut, shove, recover, again. Then at last the hollow stopped coming. The silence that followed had weight to it. Not relief exactly. Relief takes a little time to trust itself. This was the pause after violence, when everyone is still listening for the next problem. I looked down the passage. Nothing moved. I turned and checked the Unit .8 Veil soldiers. Every one of them standing. The archive core was in the hands of the first team. Its casing was marked by the crash and the hard work of recovery. But intact, I looked at the blade once, turned it in my hand, then returned it to the sheath. The sound it made settling home was low and complete. A finished sound. The sound of a thing that had done exactly what it was meant to do. Commander Saravan walked toward me. She stopped in front of me and looked at my shoulder. The wound had opened further in the chamber. My jacket was dark with it now. "You are injured," she said. "Yes." "You continued after it happened." "Yes." She held my eyes. Why? That sounds like a simple question. Sometimes it is not. That I thought about my answer for a moment, because a truthful answer matters more than a polished one. Because we were not done, I said. There was more to do. She kept looking at me. There was movement around us now. The unit preparing for extraction. Resetting into the familiar habits soldiers fall back into once survival becomes likely again. In my experience, Commander Saravan said, some soldiers continue under injury because they do not understand their own limits. Yes, I said, and some continue because they do understand the risk, but have decided the task matters more than stopping. I waited. You are the second kind, she said. Not praise, not surprised at a conclusion. I nodded once. That seemed enough for both of us. The transport recovered us 43 minutes after we signaled from the surface. The pod was cramped and cold and smelled of metal, stone dust, and the kind of exhaustion that settles into a group after close work. Nobody spoke much at first. People who have seen something difficult often need a little silence before language becomes useful again. A veil medic cleaned and dressed my shoulder with supplies from my own kit. Quick hands. No wasted words. I appreciated that. The cut was clean, painful, but not serious enough to matter tomorrow. It would leave a mark. Most things worth remembering do. I sat with my kit at my feet and the blade across my knees. Yeth sat opposite me. He had been looking at the blade since we boarded, but not like before. Before, he watched it as a curiosity. Now he watched it the way soldiers watch a thing that has survived contact with reality and come back proven. After a while, he spoke. Sergeant Marrow, he said, in the chamber, I heard a change. I looked up the blade. I rested a hand on the sheath. Yes. I heard the sound become something else. For a moment, I said nothing. Across from me, his face held none of the easy mockery from my first day aboard. None of the distance, either. What I saw there now was focus. Honest focus. The kind that comes when someone has seen a gap in their own understanding and wants to close it. It warmed, I said. Steel changes when it heats under work. The sound moves through it differently. He considered that carefully. Your grandfather knew this? Yes. He knew it from making them. Yes. Yeth nodded slowly, as if placing that fact somewhere important. Then he asked, would you teach me? I looked at him for a second longer. Not the blade, he said quickly. I'm not asking for that. I mean the rest of it. The way you move in the dark. The way you read the air. The sound. The pressure. The way you knew where things were without instruments. I leaned back against the pod wall. It is not one skill, I said. It is many skills held together by attention. I know. Attention rests on patience. He nodded. And underneath both is trust, I said. Trust in what your body is telling you when machines are telling you nothing. He gave a small, thoughtful breath. The hesitation is the problem, he said. Not the sensing itself. I looked at him more carefully then. You were listening, I said. Yes. I let a moment pass. Then I said, tomorrow morning. Early. Before the others train. His answer came at once. Yes. The kind of yes that meant the decision had already been made before the question finished. At the far end of the pod, Commander Saravan said nothing that I did not look directly at her. I did not need to. Some presences make themselves known without movement. She had heard every word out of that. I was certain. When the transport docked with the Dominion's reach, the ramp opened with a hard metal hiss. The unit filed out in rank order. I came last. That had become normal by then. No one had assigned it. No one had ordered it. It was simply where I had ended up in the shape of the group, and I had never bothered to contest it. The receiving bay was bright after Keth, 9.2 bright at first. Ship light has a different quality after a dark operation. Cleaner, flatter, almost unreal. The kind of light that makes you aware of how long your body has been braced for something worse. The others moved past into the ship's interior. Commander Saravan did not. She was standing at the edge of the bay waiting. That alone was unusual enough to stop me. She was not a person who lingered after missions. She moved through every transition with purpose. Debrief, medical, report, preparation for the next task. Always forward. Always already halfway into the next responsibility before most people had mentally left the last one. But now she was standing still, waiting for me. I stopped in front of her. Around us, the bay was quiet. The rest of the unit had already moved on. A few deck crew kept their distance. They were disciplined enough not to stare directly, though I could feel the pull of attention at the edge of the space. Commander Saravan looked at me. Then she looked at the blade at my hip. Then she held out her hand. I understood at once that I drew the blade slowly and placed it across her palm. Handle toward her, edge away. The way you hand a blade to someone you trust to understand what they are holding. She took it without a word. She did not test the edge. She did not swing it. She did not inspect it like a collector or a technician. She simply held it, feeling the weight, the balance, the distribution of work steel across an open hand. For a moment, she turned it just enough for the bay lights to move along the flat of the blade. It was still faintly warm. That seemed to matter. Your grandfather made this by hand, she said. Yes, I said. In Yorkshire, in a shed with tools older than most of the ships in this fleet. Her thumb rested lightly against the grip, and it has never failed. I thought about that before answering. Not once, I said. She turned the blade one more time. Then she gave it back to me handle first, with the same care I had used when passing it to her. I slid it into the sheath. That low, complete sound settled into the receiving bay. A quiet sound. but now I could hear the way it changed a room. "It is a serious instrument," she said. "It is." She looked at me for a long moment. Something in her expression had shifted, though not dramatically. Nothing theatrical, nothing sentimental, just a small, precise change, the kind that matters more because it is controlled. That IT was the face of someone updating a judgment they had held with confidence and now knew had been incomplete. "In my mission report," she said, "you will be listed as unit point operative, not as diplomatic attachment." I drew a slow breath. That was not a small adjustment. Among Vale officers, designation mattered. The official record mattered. Titles and mission reports shaped how other commanders read an event. They shaped what credit meant. They shaped what authority and respect followed afterward. "Commander," I said, "that designation carries weight." "It does. Assigning it to a human on treaty posting will invite commentary." "There is always commentary," she said evenly. "From certain quarters, there has been commentary for 20 years. I have never found it especially useful." There was no anger in the way she said it, only experience. She took one step closer, not aggressively, just enough to make the next words impossible to mistake. "You were the point operative on Keth 9, she said. "That is what occurred. I did not submit reports that contradict what occurred." I held her gaze. "There are some forms of respect you do not argue with because arguing cheapens them." "Then I am grateful," I said. "Do not be grateful." It was not harsh, only exact. "Accuracy is not generosity, Sergeant Marrow. It is accuracy." That landed harder than praise would have, because praise is emotional. Accuracy is structural. Praise can be withdrawn by mood, politics, or time. Accuracy sits in the record and remains itself. She paused. "When others read that report," she said, "they will know what happened on Keth 9 because the report is correct. Not because I chose to do you a favor." I nodded once. "I understand." "Yes," she said. "You do." Then she added, a little quieter, "Remember that." With that, she turned and walked toward the command corridor. The stride was the same one she always had. Forward. Exact. Composed. But there was something different in it now. Something difficult to name. Not softness. Not warmth. Recognition, perhaps. The gait of a person who has shifted something important inside herself and is still absorbing what that shift means. That I watched her until the corridor took her. Yeth appeared at my shoulder a moment later. He had that talent soldiers sometimes have for arriving without seeming to approach. Quiet boots. Controlled posture. Alert eyes. "She has not changed a mission designation in 11 years, he said. I looked at him. "The last soldier she did it for held a defensive position alone for 4 hours so the rest of the unit could extract." I said nothing. Yeth studied my face for a second, then looked toward the corridor where she had disappeared. "You understand what this means?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Good." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Tomorrow morning." "Early." "Early," I said. That seemed to satisfy him. He left. The bay emptied, and suddenly I was alone. There's a particular quiet that only comes after a mission ends. Not the silence of peace. Not the silence of sleep. The silence of systems continuing all around you while your body is only now beginning to understand that it survived. I stood there for a while under the overhead lights with the blade at my side and the ship's engines humming through the floor. If you pay attention on a ship long enough, you begin to notice that the engine noise is never really one sound. It is layers. Deep vibration under a higher mechanical tone. Slight changes in harmonics when the ship adjusts course. Small shifts most people ignore because the systems are working and they do not need to know more than that. After Keth 9, I noticed all of it. That night I sat on the edge of my bunk and thought about my grandfather, about the shed in Yorkshire. Cold mornings, the grinding wheel, the smell of metal heating underworked. I thought about the day he put the blade in my hands and told me it never needed charging. When I was younger, I understood that sentence only on the surface. I heard the obvious point, the practical point, a simple old man's fondness for old tools. Now I understood something larger inside it. He had not only given me a weapon, he had given me a piece of human logic point, 10,000 years of learning to manage, without comfort, to work, without power, to trust the hand, the eye, the ear, the patience to do a thing properly. Every fire the steel had passed through, every careful hour of shaping. Every evening he cleaned it, checked it, and kept it exactly as it needed to be. All of that was still in it, still in the blade, still in the sound it made, still in the way it answered when the world went dark and every advanced system failed at once. I sat there with that thought a long time. Then I opened the comm terminal and wrote to my sister. Evie had written to me every week since I shipped out. Without fail, she taught primary school in Bath, and her letters always contained the same three things in one order or another: news from home, a question about whether I was eating properly, and some small stubborn reminder that the world we came from still existed and was still worth caring about. I trusted that rhythm. I wrote back. Not everything. Not the classified parts. Not the archived data or the exact structure of the retrieval. But the truth of the night, as much of it as I could share honestly. I wrote. The galaxy is larger than anything we imagined when we were children. It is full of beings stronger than us, faster than us, older than us. Their weapons are more powerful. Their systems are more advanced. Their history runs deeper than ours in ways that are easy to measure and difficult to ignore at a first glance. That makes humanity seem small. I stopped there for a moment, read the words, then kept going. But I do not think that is the point anymore. I sat back and looked at the message. The ship's engine note moved softly through the metal frame of the bunk and the wall behind me. The blade rested on the shelf nearby in its sheath, quiet now, but not empty. It still felt like a thing holding memory. The next part of the letter came slower. Not because I did not know what I meant, because I wanted to say it cleanly, because some truths deserve careful language. I placed my hands on the keys again and wrote on. I placed my hands on the keys again and wrote on. What matters, I think, is this: that we learned to walk in the dark before we had lights, that we learned to find our way before we had instruments, that we learned to stay still before we had sensors telling us when to move, that we learned to make things with our hands at work because they were made with care, patience, and attention, not because they were fed by power. I stopped again. Read that part twice, then continued. We carried all of that with us when we left Earth, that we still carry it. It lives in our habits. In a way, our bodies notice things before our machines do. In a way, we keep going when comfort disappears. In a way, we can still work with simple tools when the advanced ones fail. Granddad put some of that into a blade and handed it to me before I left. He told me it never needed charging. Last night, in the tunnels of a dead moon, where every system went dark, that turned out to matter more than anything else in the room, I leaned back for a second. The words felt plain. Good. Plain words usually hold up better than impressive ones. I kept them plain. That we are still new out here, even that we're smaller than many of the things we have met. There are species in this galaxy with more strength, more speed, more years behind them, more reach, and better tools. But I'm starting to understand that what humans built into themselves over a very long, difficult history is not small at all. It is not primitive either. It is only older than the machines. That line stayed with me for a moment. I looked at it. Then I finished the letter. The galaxy is learning what we are, slowly, point one meeting at a time. One mission at a time. One long night at a time. And I think we're going to be fine. I genuinely think we're going to be fine. I sent the letter. Then I lay back on the bunk and looked up at the ceiling. The ship moved steadily through the dark. Its engines filled the room with that low, constant note. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just always there if you cared enough to hear it. After Keth 9, I did care enough. More than before. I listened to the sound a way I had listened in the tunnels, with patience, with attention, and without asking it to become anything other than what it was. There were layers in it. Deep vibration from the drive core, a higher tone riding over it. Small shifts in the sound whenever the ship adjusted course. If you listened carefully, really carefully, you could tell when the ship changed direction without looking at a single display. Why grandfather would have liked that? Maybe that was part of what changed in me after Keth 9. Not just that the Veil had finally seen me clearly. Not just that Commander Saravan had rewritten the record. It was something quieter than that. I had begun hearing the old things inside the new ones. The same rule underneath both. Pay attention. Trust what is real. The work properly. The blade rested on the shelf beside my bunk in its sheath. Quiet now. Rest. But not empty. Everything it had done that night was still in it somehow. In the warm steel, in the fine lines of its edge, in a shape memory left behind after use. Not mystical, not magical, just true in the way real work leaves truth inside a thing. Outside the port window, stars moved slowly past, cold light. Huge distance. The dark between them did not feel empty anymore, that IT felt occupied. Not only by threats and empires and old machines buried under dead moons, but by possibility, by the slow rearranging of understanding, by the fact that somewhere in the middle of all that vastness, the shape of one small human presence had shifted and would not shift back. Tomorrow morning, early, I would begin teaching Yeth how to read pressure in a closed space, how to tell a larger chamber from a narrowing tunnel by echo alone, how to let the body settle until the senses can do their work, how to trust information that arrives quietly, how to be still enough to notice what most people miss. IT would take time. The best things usually do, but it would take, and that mattered. Because teaching is how a thing stops belonging to one person and starts becoming real in the world. That more than the mission report might have been the true beginning of the change that a veiled soldier wanted to learn a human way of moving through darkness. Not because policy demanded it, not because diplomacy required it, because he had seen it work. Because reality had spoken more clearly than opinion. Because the galaxy, in its own slow way, had started updating its judgment. I lay there a long time listening to the engine note and thinking about that. Real change rarely arrives with ceremony. That IT does not always announce itself. Most of the time, it comes quietly. That a look held a little longer than before, that a title changed in a report, that a question asked without mockery, that a request to be taught, that a commander who once called you soft, standing in a receiving bay to weigh your blade in her hand and admit, without saying the word aloud, that she had been wrong. That is how it happens. Not with spectacle, with proof. The blade rested, the ship moved on, and somewhere ahead of us was another mission, another dark place, another moment when the easy answer would fail and something older would still be standing up. Why then? At least one veiled soldier would be listening differently. Maybe more than one. Maybe that was how it starts for a species. Not with grand declarations. With one true thing demonstrated so clearly that nobody honest can deny it afterward at IN. The end, that was the real story. Not the 40 hollow, not the dead zone, not the locked armor, not even the chamber where the blade began to sing. Those were the setting. The story was simpler. A man carried a blade made by his grandfather across 420 light years. He stepped into the dark with it, and when every powered thing failed, the old thing still worked. Not because it was better in every world, but because this was the world it had been waiting for. That is what changed the room. That is what changed the record. That is what changed the way they looked at me afterward. The galaxy was learning, slowly, but it was learning, and once a true note begins, it carries.